14. General tips on studying law. Dear Alex, now you are just about to start your studies. I thought I'd give you some general tips on how you should go about studying law. I'll give you some more detailed guidance later on how you should approach such things as reading textbooks or cases, but for the time being, I just wanted to lay down general guidelines to help you study as effectively as possible. Never be passive. This is the most important tip. Never, ever be passive in studying law. For example, if you look back at the previous letter and read it over again, you'll almost certainly be pretty passive in reading it. You're just reading it, without any particular agenda or set of questions in your mind, just letting me tell you whatever I have to tell you. As a result, it's unlikely that you'll remember that much of the details of what I wrote. Be honest, you don't, do you? But that's okay. The point of the letter was not to help you remember anything, but just to get you comfortable with various key terms and concepts that you'll be expected to be familiar with as a law student. I don't want you to study law like that. Always be thinking and questioning as you go through legal materials. When you are studying a particular area of law, ask yourself, what problems is this area of law intended to deal with? How does it deal with those problems? Does it do a good job of dealing with those problems? Does this area of law create more problems than it solves? Could this area of law be improved? When you are studying a particular legal rule, ask yourself, is there a better way of stating this rule? Why does this rule exist? How does it apply in practice? Are there any exceptions to this rule? When you are reading a textbook, ask yourself, how much of this information do I actually need to know? Is there a better way of presenting this information? Are there any issues the writer is skating over that I need to investigate further? When you are reading a case, ask yourself, what's the most straightforward and succinct way of summarizing the facts of this case? On the basis of what I have read so far, how would I expect this case to have been decided? How was it decided? What were the key reasons for the decision? Did the judge make any interesting observations about the law known as obiter dicta, words along the way to the ultimate decision in his or her judgment? What do the academics think of this case? What do I think? Approaching your studies with these sorts of questions in mind will make the process of studying law much more interesting and vital for you, and help to get the details of the law into your head. Remember, the more you use the information you come across, and the more you are able to arrange that information into some sort of order, the more likely you will be able to remember that information. So if you ever find yourself just reading some legal material, give yourself a shake. Take a 5-minute break to clear your head, and come back ready to take a more active approach to your studies. The need to work smart. A fact which people who aren't lawyers find it hard to understand is that the law gets substantially bigger every year. Every year brings new cases, new statutes, adding to the detail and complexity of the law. As a result, the textbooks get bigger and bigger. For example, the 13th edition of Winfield and Jolovich on Tort, published in 1989, was 650 pages long. The latest 18th edition, published 21 years later in 2010, is 336 pages long, over twice as long. I started studying tort law in 1989. So students studying tort law nowadays are expected to learn twice as much as I had to for my exams, but in the same amount of time as I had to study tort law. One way to do this would be to work twice as hard as I did as a student. But that would be pretty difficult because I worked very hard myself. So that's not an option. Instead, what you have to do is work smarter than I did, get more out of the time you have to study than I ever did. If you want to work smarter than I ever did, before you start working your way through a reading list that you have been given to read, look up the past exam papers that have been set on the subject you are studying, and see what sort of questions tend to be set on the area of law that your reading list is focused on. Use those questions as a guide to what you need to be focusing on in your reading. Read as much as you can. That will allow you to deal with those questions before, if you have time, widening your focus and looking at issues and rules that tend not be the subject of questions in the exams. A typical reading list will give you some chapters from a textbook to read, list some cases that you should look at, and then give you some references to articles written about the area of law you are looking at. When you go through the textbook for the first time, I don't think it's a good idea to take notes or highlight anything. You'll just end up copying out the book or highlighting virtually every line. I did this as a student. I ended up just coloring virtually the whole of all my textbooks yellow. Instead, work smart and just read the textbook through without making notes or highlighting the text. But don't read the book passively. As you are reading through it, be thinking, what are the big issues that the textbook is highlighting? What are the key cases, and what do they say? Who are the big academic names in this area, and what do they think? Could I do a better job of writing this chapter? If so, how would I have done it? Once you are through the textbook, and it shouldn't take long, if you are reading it without taking notes or highlighting, you need to get onto the cases. Here, prioritize the most recent cases. This is for 3 reasons. 1. The most recent cases are the ones most likely to be relevant to the exam. 2. The most recent cases may well sum up for you the effect of the previous cases on the reading list, thus saving you the trouble of reading them. 3. The most recent cases are the ones least likely to appear or to have been dealt with very well in the textbook. Once you have got through the recent cases, you should then read some case notes on the most important cases. You will be able to tell from the reading list what the most important cases are. A case note comprises a summary of and comments on a particular case, usually written by an academic and occasionally by a practicing barrister. I will tell you in a subsequent letter how to find out where to get case notes on a particular case. But 2 journals in particular carry case notes on all the important legal cases: the Law Quarterly Review and the Cambridge Law Journal. It is well worth reading case notes on important cases in both of those journals as a way of learning more about these cases and getting some critical commentary on how those cases should have been decided. Once you are through the cases, you will be on to the articles section of your reading list. Don't assume that all the articles on your reading list are going to be really good. Some of them won't be, but they have been put on your reading list because they seem relevant to the area of law that you are studying. When you are going through an article, the only real question you should be asking yourself is, summed up as concisely as possible, what is this author actually saying? You need to be able to reduce the article down to a 5-10 line summary, setting out its basic argument, or you won't be able to retain it in your head. If it's clear that the article that you are looking at can't be reduced down in this way, then just skip through it, looking to see if there are any small, interesting points that you can pick up from it. But otherwise, don't sweat over the article trying to figure out what it's saying. Instead, 1. Google the article to see if anyone else has been able to sum up its basic argument. And 2. If you get the chance, ask the person who set the reading list what they think the author of the article was trying to say. Once you have gone through the articles you have been set, you need to go back to the textbook and go through it again, this time making notes of important looking points that you think you will need to remember for the exam and that you aren't already familiar with from your other reading. If things have gone the way I hope and predict, your notes won't be that extensive and certainly won't be as voluminous as they would have been had you made notes on the textbook on your first run through it. If you've done all that, give yourself a pat on the back. You've got through the reading list. If you have time, do some research on the internet to see if there are any further articles or other materials that look relevant and important for the area of law you are studying, and the sort of questions that might come up on that area of law in the exam. I'll give you some tips on how to do that in a subsequent letter. Your notes. So you should be making notes on the cases you read, and any case notes you look at, any articles you read, details in the textbook that you aren't familiar with after you have done all your other reading, and that seem important. You should also be making notes on any lectures you attend, and points made in small group teaching sessions that you attend. I'll talk about taking notes on 4 and 5 in another letter, but here are a few tips on taking notes on 1, 2, and 3. Your notes on a particular case should start on a fresh sheet of A4 paper, so you never have more than one case on the same piece of paper, and should be structured as follows: name of case, citation, court facts, outcome, reasons, comments. The facts of the case should be summarized as succinctly as possible. In summarizing the facts, don't abbreviate the names of the parties. Full names are more memorable than letters, but otherwise try to get the facts down to their essentials. The outcome of the case is simply the bare result: who won. The reasons you get from the judgments in the case. Don't try to summarize the whole of a judgment, just look for the key paragraphs where the reasons for the judge's decision are set out. Comments on the case could be your comments, or comments you have picked up from case notes on the case, or your teachers. Your notes on the articles you read should be structured as follows: author, title of article, journal citation, basic argument. Any other interesting points, comments. The comments on the article could be your comments, or points that have been made about the article by other authors. Your notes from the textbook should be fun and interesting to put together and to go back to. Again, passivity is your enemy. If you are writing out chunks of text from the textbook, your mind is likely to switch off, your work will slow down, and nothing will be going into your head. Instead, you have to learn to be creative with your notes. Think about using diagrams and pictures to represent the information in the textbook that you want to make a note of. Your presentation may not be that superior to what is in the textbook, but the creative act of imagining how to present this information in a new and different way, and you're putting your ideas into practice, will help the information that you are making notes on to get into your head and stay there. This is particularly important when you are making notes on a particularly dry and technical area of law. It is vital that your notes not be dry and technical, but find some way of presenting the details of the law in an interesting and vital way. The effort you make to think of how to do that will pay off in spades in helping you recall that information later on. Being organized. You can't be successful as a law student unless you are organized. Make sure you have a system for filing your physical notes. It might be an idea to keep your notes on cases on a particular area of law separate from your physical notes on textbooks and articles, and to file the cases in alphabetical order, so as to make them really easy to locate in case you want to make a quick note of something you've read about a particular case. You will also be downloading a lot of documents, PDFs of articles and cases from the internet. Make sure again that your computer is set up to save those documents in an organized fashion. Create folders on your computer for the different subjects you will be studying. Within each of those folders, it might be an idea to create a subfolder case file to store PDFs of any cases you download relevant to a particular subject you are studying. Also create subfolders for particular topics you will be studying in a particular subject. The headings on your reading lists and lecture handouts will be a good guide as to what those topics will be to store away PDFs of articles, as well as soft copies of notes on textbooks and articles that you have made on a computer. And make sure you regularly save everything law related on your computer onto memory sticks in case your computer crashes. If you are using a cloud service, such as Dropbox, to store all your work on, it's still essential that you back up your work regularly to guard against the possibility of something going wrong with the cloud service. You also need to organize your life as well as your notes. You won't get anywhere with your studies unless you give yourself a fair chance to spend extended periods sitting and studying. If you are constantly dashing off all over the place from one commitment to another, you won't get anywhere. So plan your weeks, figure out where you need to be and when, and figure out what you are going to be doing in the spaces in between. Make up your mind in advance how you are going to be spending the time available to you to study. There are few things more conducive to creating stress and wasting time than wondering, what should I do now? Make sure you know when you wake up in the morning what you are going to be doing that day, and focus on getting it done, pulling it all together. If you follow all of the above advice, you should slowly start accumulating an impressive set of notes on the subjects you are studying. However, having a big file of notes on a particular subject can lure a student into a false sense of security that he or she really knows the subject. No, having a big file of notes has put you into a good position to know your subject, but you still need to pull the notes into one coherent whole. One way American law students do this is to write an outline of an entire subject they are studying. In other words, they write their own mini textbook. but one which reflects the progress that you have made in your studies and is geared towards addressing the topics and issues that have emerged as being important for you to master for the exams. I think writing an outline of a particular subject is a great way of getting the details of that subject into your head. But you mustn't forget that it's your performance on paper, and not what's in your head, that will determine how well you do in the exams. So for me, practicing past paper questions is an absolute must for any law student. You have to learn how to apply the knowledge in your head to concrete questions. And doing past paper questions, so long as you do them well, has exactly the same effect as writing an outline. By using the information in your notes to compose your answers, you help that information to become solidly locked into your head. So those are my basic tips. I'll be in touch soon with some more detailed guidance on approaching textbooks, cases, and so on. All best wishes, Nick.